Let's lock in. This lesson is one of the most testable topics in AQA GCSE PE because there's just so many marks you can pick up. So in this video, we're going to define the components of fitness. We're going to learn how to link them to sports, then explain how fitness tests measure them, and then finally, evaluation on why those tests can be helpful and also what their limitations are. So the examiner isn't looking for waffle, okay? They want clean, structured answers. So whenever you get a question, you want to have a structure starting with this is the component, this is why it matters in sport, this is the test, this is the equipment, this is the procedure, this is how you measure the score, these are the results, and these are what the results mean, and this is why the test is or isn't relevant. Today we're going to cover everything you need to hit full marks. Firstly, let's look at the components of fitness, their definitions, and what they look like in sports. So, we've looked at fitness before in a previous video where we spoke about health and fitness. Fitness isn't just one thing, it's a set of individual components. We're going to look at agility. Agility is the ability to change direction quickly and accurately while keeping control and balance of the movement. For example, a winger in football, a netball dodge, a cut in basketball, and things like that. Balance is the ability to maintain stability. There are two types of balance. There is static balance and dynamic balance, as you can see on the screen. Examples of balance can be in gymnastics, when a gymnast is holding a position or landing after a jump and things like that. Next, we have cardiovascular endurance. Cardiovascular endurance is the ability of the heart and the lungs to supply oxygen to working muscles for a long period of time. Examples, any long distance activity or any games like football and even boxing. Next, we have coordination, the ability to use different body parts together smoothly and efficiently. For example, anything that involves catching and throwing, or striking a ball, or performing a complex routine in gymnastics and things of that nature. Next, we have flexibility. Flexibility is the range of movement possible at a joint. For example, gymnastics, dance, kicking, lunging, and tennis, these are all movements that require flexibility. Also, if you're ever evaluating the importance of flexibility, you could gain some more marks if you mention that flexibility can help to improve technique and can also reduce the risk of injury in certain contexts. Moving on to muscular endurance. Muscular endurance is the ability of a muscle or muscle group to contract repeatedly without tiring. For example, doing repeated push-ups or multiple rowing strokes or repeated jumps or holding a defensive position, things of that nature. Next, we move on to power, which is also known as explosive strength. Power, the equation is actually strength times speed, because power is the ability to apply force quickly. For example, when you are jumping for a rebound, or during a sprint start, or during a shot put, or when you're going in for a powerful tackle. Next, we have reaction time. Reaction time is the time taken to respond to a stimulus. For example, sprint start to the whistle, or the goalkeeper reacting to a shot. Or the goalkeeper. Next up, we have strength. Strength is the ability of the muscle to exert force. And there are 4 subtypes of strength that you need to know. As you can see on the screen, we have maximal strength, static strength, dynamic strength, and explosive strength, similar to power as we've seen before. Next, we have speed. So speed is how fast can you move across the ground or just moving a body part. Examples of speed are a 100-meter sprint or when chasing down an opponent in a game. Now, let's link sports to components of fitness. Whenever you are answering a question that requires you to link a sport to a component of fitness, you want to sweep up as much marks as possible. So this is a method that always works. You want to do a 3-step justification. Step 1, you name the actual sport or the action. Step 2, name the component of fitness. And step 3, explain why it matters. So link it to success and performance. For example, if you're talking about football, you could say something like, a football midfielder needs cardiovascular endurance to maintain a high work rate for the full 90 minutes. repeatedly supporting with the attacking and the defending. If you want to talk about gymnastics, you could say a gymnast needs balance and flexibility to control their body positions in order to achieve a full range of motion in difficult skills like the splits, holds, and landings. You can even talk about a sprinter. You could say a sprinter needs speed and reaction time to accelerate quickly and respond instantly to the starting signal. I hope you get where I'm going with this. So it's very important that you're able to link it to real life sporting examples and make it flow, because that's how you unlock those high marks. Even more impressive is if you can show evaluation by using however. So you can say cardiovascular is important in blah 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 sport because of blah blah blah, and then hit them with a however, cardiovascular endurance is less needed in sports like shot put because a shot putter would rely on explosive power rather than sustained aerobic performance because the nature of the event is very short. Using that stands you out as a top student who actually knows what they're talking about. Now, onto the content heavy mashed potatoes part of this video, where I think you're going to need to take a lot of notes on this part because there's a lot of details for you to know. So feel free to pause the video where you need. Expected to know main procedures of fitness tests that measure these components of fitness. So when AQA says main procedures, think about facilities, equipment, the rules and the steps of how to carry the test out, the measurements, whether it's in seconds, levels, centimeters, repetitions, things like that. The conclusion, so what the score tells you and how to compare results. And finally, evaluation. This is it relevant to that sport and does it have limitations? So now let's go through each fitness test and we're going to look at the main procedures for each of these. Pause the video where you need to take notes. First, we're going to start with the Illinois agility test. We have the equipment and setup. We have the procedure, step 1, step 2, step 3, the conclusion, the evaluation, including its limitation. Now let's look at the stalk stand test, which is testing static balance. These are the equipment slash setup for the test and the procedure for the test. These are the steps to carry out the test. This is the conclusion you derive from the test. And finally, the evaluation and limitation. Next, we have the bleep test or multi-stage fitness test, which is measuring cardiovascular endurance. Again, equipment setup, as you can see on the screen, and then the procedure, as you can see here. The score recorded is the final level and the shuttle reached. And then we have the conclusion, evaluation, and limitation. Next up, we have the wall toss test, which is measuring coordination or testing coordination. Again, equipment setup, as you can see on the screen. The procedure here, as you can see on the screen. Here's how the score is recorded by the number of successful catches and throws in the given time period. The conclusion, and finally the evaluation and limitation of this test. Next, the sit and reach test, which is measuring flexibility, specifically the flexibility of your posterior chain, so your hamstrings and your back as well, but mainly your hamstrings really. Equipment setup, as you can see here on the screen. Procedure here on the screen. The score recorded is the distance in centimeters, your best score in centimeters. The conclusion is if you can reach a higher distance, then you have greater flexibility. And finally, we have the evaluation and limitation. Next, the sit-up bleep test, which is measuring muscular endurance. Equipment setup, as you can see on the screen. the procedure here, as you can see on the screen, outlining each step, the score recorded, the conclusion, and finally the evaluation and limitation. Next, we have the vertical jump test, which is testing power / explosive strength. The equipment and setup for this test, as you can see on the screen, the procedure, as you can see on the screen, the score recorded, the conclusion, finally, the evaluation and limitation points. Moving on to the ruler drop test, which is measuring reaction time. We have the equipment and setup, as you can see on the screen, the procedure, each step outlined, as you can see on the screen, the score recorded, followed by conclusion, finishing up with the evaluation and limitation points. Next, we have the 1 rep max test, which is measuring maximal strength. The equipment and setup, as you can see on the screen, each step of the procedure on the screen, score recorded, conclusion, followed by the evaluation and limitation points for that test. Next, we have the 30-meter sprint test, which is measuring speed. The equipment and setup here on the screen, the procedure, as you can see outlined on the screen, score recorded, followed by the conclusion from this test and the evaluation and limitation points from this test. Moving on to the hand grip dynamometer test, which is measuring strength, specifically the strength in your forearms. The equipment, simply you just need a hand grip dynamometer, as you can see on the screen. The procedure, each step outlined on your screen, the score recorded, followed by the conclusions of this test. And lastly, we have the evaluation and limitation of this test. Okay, AQA wants you to understand how test scores are measured and recorded. And there are two important types of data you need to understand. We have quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative data is numeric data, which actually, if you think about it, most fitness tests will give you quantitative data in numbers, whether it's centimeters or seconds or whatever it may be. So this can be in the 30-meter sprint test, the Illinois test, the Stoke stand test, or it could be levels like in the bleep test or in the sit-up bleep test. Again, like we mentioned, it could be centimeters or the number of reps and things like that. Qualitative data, on the other hand, is more descriptive information that is based on observation. So an example of a qualitative observation could be saying the technique was good, or the technique was poor, or the technique broke down during the later stages of the bleep test. That's an example of qualitative data. So it's important to understand these two types of data and understand when and how to use them when collecting fitness testing data. And excitingly, when you've got your quantitative results, you can always compare it to national averages to see how you rank. And these are important because they can decide whether a performer is average, above average, or if they need improvement. I remember in high school, I was really good at the bleep test that I won in our PE class, and I think my score was graded as excellent on the normative chart. So if you're ever doing any bleep test or anything, it's worth comparing it to national averages so you see just how good you are. Lastly, let's finish up with reasons for fitness testing. So this is a list that's important to learn because, like I said at the start of this video, this is a very testable topic. So this could very, very likely come up in the exam. So reasons for fitness testing: 1, to identify strengths and weaknesses, to monitor improvement, to help to show a starting level of fitness, so like your baseline, to inform training requirements, such as, informing what type of training methods are needed and things like that, to compare against norms and national averages, like we spoke about, to motivate the performer and help them set goals, set targets, objectives, and progress, to provide variety in training programs in order to keep engagement high. And these are the limitations of fitness testing you need to know. And lastly, just always remember that to increase the validity and the reliability of any test results, of any test you're doing, you want to control these factors. Alright, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you want to do more practice papers and revise more, check out our platform www.superpeonline.com for a bunch of resources that will help you improve your grade. Again, remember, whenever you're asked a question about main procedures on this topic, you want to use the structure we talked about at the start. So name the test, talk about the equipment, the setup, the procedures, the conclusion, how the score is recorded, the evaluation, and the limitations. Alright, that's it. See you in the next video.